Yeah, we can go live.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar through the British Romanian Chamber of Commerce. How you get in? I think everyone's connected to audio now, so I think we'll make a start. Again, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's British Romanian Chamber of Commerce webinar. I'm Neil McGregor, the chairman of the Chamber. This is our second webinar of this week. So again, we're providing good content to our members of the Chamber. And whereas on our earlier call in the week, we had 3 speakers, all of whom were based in the UK. Today we have a mixture of people who are in Romania and in the UK. So for those of you who may be new to this, we're streaming live on Facebook. We're also recording this. So the people you see attending us on Zoom are only part of the story. We have on average twice or 3 times as many people watching us on Facebook as we do on Zoom, but it's much easier to answer questions if you're putting questions through on Zoom. However, we have a chat function, which I'm going to paste in here, the page of the Chamber's website, which you should see at the bottom of your screen, and that gives a link to describe what today's call is about and who our speakers are. So today is the 15th of October, which is not just the day after the anniversary of the Battle of Hastings. It is the day upon which we were supposed to know, according to the UK government, whether we were going to carry on negotiating for a deal or not. As you may recall, Brexit has happened, and we're now in a transitional period which runs out at the end of this year. And what is happening now is that there are negotiations between the UK and the EU upon what will happen after the end of this year in terms of trade and other access and rights. So our 3 speakers today are Cosmin Dincă, our Global Trade Senior Advisor from EY here in Bucharest, Dr. Raymond Davies, a Senior International Strategist who is coming to us from Bournemouth in the UK, and then Andrei, Georgescu, who is a partner at the law firm Suciu, Popa here in Bucharest. So we have, I think, 3 interesting speakers to tell us what they think is going on and what happens next. What we don't have is anyone from the UK government to tell us what's actually going to happen, or from the EU Commission, because I suspect that none of them actually know what's going to happen at this point. We have to wait and see what the result is going to be of the continuing negotiations. My suspicion is that they will keep talking until the last minute, but we're going to have something in place to make sure that whatever happens, something is in place. I did get a call from one of the Romanian television stations recently asking about the Kent access permit. This is a couple of weeks after it was first announced. And again, I think I have the perception that they rather thought it was some kind of internal border in the UK rather than simply a means of managing the queues of TIRs approaching the Channel ports. So enough of me. I think our first speaker is Cosmin. So Cosmin, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Neil. It's always a pleasure to have these important discussions given the tight deadline, 1st of January 2021, when we will see on ourselves what implications both from customs, global trade, financial services will be. So today I will try to summarize some ideas and subjects on what will happen starting with 1st of January 2021 from a customs, VAT and excise duties perspective. Given the UK's choice to cease to participate in this EU single market and customs union, and to put an end to the free movement of person, goods and services with the EU as of 31 of December 2020, means actually that the EU-UK relationship will change drastically for businesses on both sides from that date onwards. So basically, it is exactly what you mentioned earlier, that these changes are inevitable regardless of the outcome of the ongoing EU-UK negotiations. And of course, the risk compounding the pressure that businesses are already under due to this COVID-19 outbreak. So, from my point of view, what businesses need to do now is to have ready a checklist and have try to estimate what the implications from a global trade, customs and VAT will be, irrespective of the fact that they do business with the UK or onwards, if UK companies do business with the EU side. So it is essential that all these companies prepare for these changes and that they take all the necessary decisions and complete all required administrative actions before this 31st of December 2020. So we have less than 3 months to get ready. I can see that from my past experience with our EY colleagues in the UK, companies have by far started to get ready from this perspective. Make checklist, prepare personnel, do all kind of radiography of what will happen starting with next year, so that they will be ready and have no delays on their supply chains in trade of goods. So first, my first subject for today to discuss is this trading goods. Basically, what will be the obligations as importer and exporters. So under the EU law, businesses will have different responsibilities depending on their where they are situated in the supply chain, whether they are a manufacturer, an importer, or a wholesale distributor. Basically, as of 1st of January 2021, EU businesses that currently buy goods from the UK and place them on the EU market will become importers, while those that currently distribute products to the United Kingdom will become exporters. So what does that mean? That they will need to comply with a new set of obligations according to the applicable both Union and UK rules. So irrespective of the fact that a free trade agreement will be signed between the two territories. Moving next on customs formalities, checks and controls on goods. As of next year, customs rules required under EU law will apply to all goods entering customs territory of the EU from the UK, or leaving that customs territory to the United Kingdom. So even if an ambitious free trade agreement will be established between the two territories, providing, let's say, for zero tariffs or zero quotas on goods, and with customs and regulatory cooperation, all the products traded between the EU and the UK will be subject to regulatory compliance checks and controls on imports, for safety, for health, and I don't know, other public policy purposes. Another important aspect that I would like to share with you is this rules of origin. What is origin? Origin is the national economic identity of a good. So it's really important to establish the origin of a good in international trade. So basically, as of 1st of January, companies will have to demonstrate that originating status of goods traded in order for this to be entitled to preferential treatment under a future possible EU-UK agreement. So they will need to know the rules of applicable origin. So for such goods which do not meet such requirements, of course, they will be liable to customs duties, even if, I don't know, the EU trade agreement will be put in place until then. So what businesses need to do is to get used to these rules of origin and make an assessment on the impact on the origin calculation for the goods they trade with the UK and vice versa. It's also applicable for the UK companies. In terms of VAT and excise duties, starting with January 1st, basically the rules for payment and refund of VAT will change. I think this is relevant also for goods and services. Excise duty will also be due upon importation of goods which are brought into the territory of the EU, coming from the UK. Also for excisable goods such as alcoholic products, tobacco products, energy products, and and so on. Okay, so first of all, from a customs perspective, you can leave the other slide. What companies, let's say, that do businesses for do customs formalities for the first time is that they will need to obtain these EORI numbers, which is kind of customs registration in the EU, needed both for importers and exporters to the UK. They will need to know that VAT will need to be paid at importation unless they have some deferral or reverse charge mechanism available. As mentioned earlier, make sure that they know how to assess the origin of the traded goods and so on. More sophisticated things that need to be checked is that if there are some non-tariff restriction applicable, such as import licenses, export licenses, say, I don't know, for goods which are subject to this kind of restrictions. Pay attention to goods tariff classification, because this basically depends and decides what customs duties will be paid for these goods. Reassess the origin calculation for goods traded with the UK or vice versa. Adapt their IT systems, irrespective of the fact that the customs authorities are involved or not. Make the IT connections, make automations, I don't know, for tariff classification of their goods or for making some fast customs clearance for their goods. And at the end, make sure that their personnel is trained to handle this kind of customs operations, because for some companies, for sure there will be the first time when they will do these customs formalities, and training for personnel is needed. We can move forward to the next slide. I mentioned earlier this excise implications. So no more movement under the MSS with the UK. So excise goods will need a different regime to move under duty suspension. They will be treated as imports and exports, such as discussed earlier. For example, as we enter in more technical details, companies will need to require or apply for other customs regimes such as transit, even if more member states are involved in this circulation of goods, apply for bonded warehousing, obtain simplifications for customs so that the supply chain is not affected. You can move to the next slide, and I think the last one. So as for VAT, as the general implications, VAT will be paid in customs at importation, both in the EU and the UK. In case of exports from the EU, we have a VAT exemption based on the fact that the goods leave the EU. So we need to make this proof of export to get this VAT exemption for exports, which currently is treated as intra-community supply, so a big difference. The more sophisticated ones, so no more direct VAT registration for UK companies. They will need to move to fiscal representative in the EU, so most likely they will be jointly liable in various EU member states. So here, from a VAT perspective, comes the need to appoint a fiscal representative, as they will be treated as non-EU established companies. So to summarize, given that we have less than 3 months until all these kind of formalities and checks will happen, I, as a global trade advisor, recommend the companies in Romania and businesses in Romania to make this checklist and see how they can improve it, and in order to be ready for 1st of January. I'm available for questions. I understand that there will be a session of questions at the end of this webinar. And now I have the pleasure to move on to our next speaker, which is Dr. Raymond Davies. Hello.
Thank you, Cosmin.
Thank you also.
Could I have my presentation, please? Thank you, Stefan.
If I can just mention while you're organizing that, we now have, I think, 54 people with us on Facebook Live, so welcome to them also.
Thank you, Neil. It's really interesting coming in from the British perspective here. Of course, it's really looking at the opportunities that come from the Brexit situation as we go towards the last 3 months of that transitional period. It's really interesting because, in a sense, as we know, Brexit happened at the end of January, and it's always at 11 p.m. because, of course, London time's -1 hour from Brussels. Same situation, of course, for the 31st of December at 11 p.m. from the UK perspective. I think today, like Neil pointed out, was that we were expecting a decision from the Prime Minister whether to remain within those discussions. I think the positive news coming from the UK, of course, is that, and it happens with other negotiations that are going on with other countries, is very confident of, and what's been put over here is mini deals will come out. So if there's a withdrawal or withdrawing from the negotiations, there'll be a whole series of mini deals. And a lot of those are really already in place. So it's just part of the negotiation tactics, and we should have that clarified on Friday by the Prime Minister. Can I have the next slide, please? So the great way of looking at this, I think, from our perspective, is what is the British perspective of Romania? We're the 5th largest economy, and Romania really is seen in its geopolitical position as a crossroads into the European Union and all the trading relationships that you have, and Italy and Germany high on that list. And also within the Commonwealth of Independent States, Middle East, and I would say the whole Black Sea area. Also, the amount of trade is in total 5.8 billion. And the Romanian economy grew by 3.9% in 2019. We're aware of the COVID situation, but of course in the recovery of that, that's a significant growing economy. So that's going to be very attractive to British companies, British exporters. And I think in the reverse as well. Don't underestimate that the UK is the 5th largest economy, very welcoming to companies working here and the ability to come into our economy. It's also seen that English as a business language within Romania is good, and therefore an aspect doesn't fear for British companies to come into Romania. And it's really interesting because it's in the description of what I've got here on the slide, and rather than kind of read it all the way through, it's interesting that the Department of International Trade sees Romania as an increasingly sophisticated market. I think what they mean there, in a sense, is the size of the population, again, highly qualified workforce. And of course, we welcome a lot of Romanians into our own economy, and a widespread understanding of English language, which is huge from a British perspective as well. Next slide, please. So some of the basic perspective, again, is the 55th country out of 190 countries in doing business. Again, it goes on the business language Romanian, but they do say that we are likely to have a translator type situation, but that's again, something that is not a hurdle at all. I think the other one is the GDP per capita, about 12,280 compared to the UK at 42,000 US dollars. Is from a British perspective, we know that we can get quality workforce within Romania, working with Romania at a relatively lower cost than we would be able to do it in Britain. So really seeing Romania has a kind of regional aspect to do and work together. Again, the economic growth aspect, you know, a close at 4% plus is a huge market for, and a growing market for the British perspective. Next slide, please. So the interesting thing is they've gone through every part of the economy within Romania. Obviously, infrastructure, a lot of spend going on and modernization of Romanian infrastructure. So a lot of kind of business company interest in being involved with that. I think the other one, particularly at my heart as well, and health care and life sciences. With Romania having a kind of insurance type market, and also just as much in the digital, strengthening primary care, and all the kind of evolution that's happening on the healthcare side. And I would include in telemedicine, and then again, the Chamber was excellent in putting the telemedicine kind of a webinar together that really demonstrated how far in advance that actually Romania is, and really looking at telemedicine, and in a sense, looking at the borderless aspect of that and the digital aspect of that. So from the Romanian point of view, of course, the healthcare market in the UK is huge. And really what's developing on the ground in the healthcare should really be looking at export potential for Romanian companies and working with the supply chains here in the UK. Energy as well is seen as a huge area of potential for British companies. And in the security area as well, there's a close partnership between our two countries. So all kinds of opportunities there. Retail, again, they kind of look at as the sophisticated market, as the Romanian market develops, that there's a high awareness of UK products. And it's really interesting on the food and drink side, by the way. That's probably going to be one of the mini deals if there isn't a full withdrawal agreement, and that could be a huge opportunity, I think, for the Romania companies on the food and drink side into the UK too. Obviously, automotive comes in big because I think one of the issues for the United Kingdom is really looking at where regionally, as everyone and the supply chains come into local regionalized situations, then actually looking at some collaborative approaches on the industrial side with Romania could be huge. And I think with the automotive industry valued at €30 billion within Romania, I think that's a huge opportunity for British collaboration in that market. And at the same time, because over here, with the fallout from COVID-19, really supply chains looking at new markets, new approaches, and particularly in the automotive side, huge opportunities, I think, for Romanian companies here in the UK. Next slide, please. So the best way to look at and understand what Britain is really, the whole change from kind of withdrawal from the EU is really Britain's now looking at a bilateral trade kind of approach between countries, looking at bilateral trade and FTAs, free trade agreements. So the UK is systematically negotiating free trade, and they call them and strategic partnership agreements. So they're taking really a reset of the view of arrangements in a bilateral way with individual nations. I think that's a huge advantage for Romania, as it's seen as the crossroads. And a classic example of that, the very latest free trade agreement that was signed a few days ago was with Ukraine. Georgia signed theirs in June, and both are ready to go at 1st of January. So Romania, part of that dynamic, a new approach on Black Sea trade, could be, again, a huge opportunity for Romania. The big one, of course, with Japan from the UK point of view, but others being negotiated, and the big ones, of course, the United States, New Zealand, Australia, and India. In looking at that kind of collaboration, then there's huge opportunities, I think, working with the UK into those kind of bilateral arrangements too. And I think that's particularly, if we look at the sectorial areas that I quickly covered, and looking at integrating the SME supply chains, because the SME sector is the one being hit with the COVID-19 and the recovery in that, and really investigating how we can really integrate those supply chains together and springboard into and use those into new export markets together. Black Sea being an example. Next slide, please. So this also gives a huge opportunity to influence trade policy and British trade policy. And the great thing about the withdrawal from the EU is all of a sudden the select committees have now in the House of Commons and now come back with full power and influence. And they really where the green papers and white papers that lead to new acts in Parliament originate. So there are common select committees to each UK government department. I've used the term HM because we use the term Her Majesties, but we're talking UK government departments. And they examine spending policies administration and also in effect can initiate the kind of laws and policies that happen through those departments. I put each department committee has 11 MPs, so you can communicate with the MPs, influence that, you can be on the inquiries and put that in. So in sectorial areas, you can influence quite profoundly British trade policy and how it would relate to Romania. I put some of the key select committees. The Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee would be an obvious. The Committee on the Future Relationship with the European Union is another one. Defence Committee as well, because of the commitment that NATO has, and there was joint exercises, for example, in Georgia and in Estonia. So again, on the industrial side, that may be something that Romania can explore. The Foreign Affairs Select Committee. The big one, I think that could be huge in influencing on the healthcare and the telemedicine side. And coming into the huge healthcare market here is the Health and Social Care Committee, and they're just going through a revolutionary type of approach, how health and care, which is adult care, will work together. The Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee, now that's important because it's local government, and that is the LEPs. That's the Local Enterprise Partnerships, which is basically the private sector working with local authorities, and they have a lot of money to encourage inward investment, working and integrating supply chains. So that committee could be a real powerful influence. And of course, the International Trade Committee. Next slide, please. So one of the ways in which you can kind of get involved as well on this thing is, of course, the all-party parliamentary groups which are formed. And it's really funny, when I looked at the House of Commons register, it's over 600 pages. And of course, there's the Romanian APPG, all-party parliamentary group, which really has a lot of influence. And obviously, you go through the list and look on the MPs on that. It was great to see, of course, that's the chamber kind of guiding and leading that. So here's the huge aspect of that. I went through the list of people who are on that, and it's so interesting that the Right Honourable Greg Hans, MP, Conservative, who's the Minister of State for the Department of International Trade on trade policy. And it's really interesting because I was talking to Greg early in the week on another chamber over here in the UK meet, and he was making very positive soundings about healthcare and working in an international basis on that. So he's on the APG for Romania. Bob Bachmann as well. He is the executive secretary for the 1922 committee. Now, 1922 committee is the all-powerful conservative group backbenchers and the influence that they have. So you'll hear a lot of the news on what the 1922 committee does over here within the Conservative Party. Another one is Brendan Clark Smith. He's on the Housing Committee, Local Government, so obviously a LEP influence. And what's interesting for Brendan is he got elected in 2019 and took the largest swing in the country away from Labour. So he's one of the new MPs that have been brought in since 2019 on a Brexit ticket. And his constituency voted 70% to leave the European Union. So he has a kind of Brexit mindset, but obviously affinity with Romania. Stephen Timms as well on the chair, is literally the chair of a select committee, works and pensions. Drew Hendry, who's Scottish Nationalist Party, is actually the shadow for them for the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department, so that's a huge influence. And Carol Managan, the MP for SNP, is Science and Technology Select Committee, so that's huge again in influence. And she's actually the shadow spokesman for the Scottish National Party in Parliament for the Armed Forces. Next slide, please. So I just put the final slide to lead into Andrei, is really the EU perspective, as we have commented, is really Britain, in effect, becomes a third country, just treated like any WTO country. Hopefully that's going to be different, and we will have a withdrawal agreement that works for all the mini deals. And I just put a little list of which I think Cosmin covered most of them, but it's just watching what the European Commission sees it as. So thank you, and I think this is enough time to pass it on to Andrei, and on to you.
Thank you for your great presentation. Thank you to Cosmin as well for the presentation earlier. Let me share my screen. My presentation is going to focus on the EU and UK competition law rules post-Brexit. This is an interesting topic that I chose because, first of all, it's part of my expertise, but second, it's also one of the gray areas which heavily depends on the UK and the EU getting a deal done by the end of the transition periods. Because as you will see, there are some quite important loose ends that still need to be sorted out in this area. So during the transition period, which is as it was mentioned earlier, until 31st of December this year, the EU treaties fully apply within the EU, also as the general principles of EU law. And by virtue of this application, the European Commission and the EU still has jurisdiction over the UK in terms of competition. In a public document, in a public position document issued by the UK government in February 2020, the UK government reaffirmed the need to maintain the more or less the same rules affecting competition in the EU post-Brexit. And furthermore, they said that keeping the same rules would not require any legal or regulatory alignment, which is for the most part true, but at least for the substantial part, there are some procedural hurdles which need to be passed, and especially as regards state aid, where there may actually be a clash between EU rules and what the UK wants to implement after Brexit. So the presentation will be structured in three parts. First, it will be covering mergers and acquisitions, and the way the mergers and acquisitions will be subject to merger control by the European Commission and or by the UK Competition Authority. The second one is about antitrust, the sanctioning of cartels or abuse of dominant position, and the last part, which I think is the greatest of all areas, is the state aid part. So as regards merger control, during the transition period, UK will be broadly treated as a member state. The one-stop shop principle, which designates the European Commission as the sole assessor of mergers, will still be in place. If there is a community dimension which triggers the competence of the jurisdiction of the European Commission. After the transition period, the European merger regulation effect is removed, and there is a post-transition period where the EC decisions will no longer apply in the UK. So as a result, if a final decision, if a merger is notified to the European Commission by 31st December and the European Commission does not reach a decision, then the UK Competition Market Authorities, which is the competition authority in the UK, will also have jurisdiction to investigate the proposed transaction. The practical consequence of this is that parties to the transaction may be advised to consider both UK and European Commission filings where there is a chance that their transaction does not get cleared by the end of this year. Second, it's the UK turnover being considered in the overall turnover for determining whether the transaction is or not assessed by the competition authorities. So by the end of the transition period, the UK turnover of the parties will still be considered as EU turnover and will be computed into the turnover of the transaction. Afterwards, the transaction will be notified to both the European Commission and the competition and the UK Competition Authority. This may lead to first administrative burdens because the UK authority obviously has additional administrative fees for clearing merger notifications, and also uncertainty as the two authorities may not reach the same decision. And this is a loose end which needs to be resolved by a deal, because if the no deal status quo remains, then maybe very well that the same merger is assisted in parallel by the European Commission and the Competition Authority in the UK, and different conclusions are being reached. The silver lining here is that in absence of administrative cooperation agreements, the European Commission still cooperates with other competition authorities outside the EU. My example here was the United States of Justice Federal Trade Commission, and they have a good standing relationship, which let's say not prohibits them, but steers them towards the same conclusions when assessing the merger. So there is a best friends relation that does not allow for different conclusions to be arrived at after assessing the merger. But still, there are practical considerations which need to be which need to be addressed here before year end. So the parties should look whether the merger is likely to be notified to the competition authority, to the European Commission before the 31st of September. If not, they should be considering engaging the UK competition authority as well. Also, as said earlier, for transactions which are notified after the transition period, the UK turnover will not be included for the purpose of calculating the materiality threshold. So this way, the parties can, if they are just on the verge of meeting the EU threshold for notification, they can, let's say, manipulate the system a little bit if the UK turnover is the one tipping over the scales of the notification requirement, because if they hold the notification right after 31st of December, the UK turnover will not be considered in the overall calculation of the transaction magnitude. But anyway, competition provisions in the sale purchase agreement will need to consider all possible outcomes which may result out of the EU-UK negotiations, meaning that worst case scenario, there is no deal and the transaction may be assessed in parallel. As regards antitrust enforcement and investigations, I think this is the most straightforward area, because the antitrust rules apply by the end of the transition period. The European Commission investigates infringements of competition in the UK which affect markets within the EU. The Competition Authority in the UK can investigate potentially infringing conduct under the UK domestic prohibitions. And moreover, where the European Commission has initiated proceedings before the transition period, it still has the competence to apply fines, because it is considered that the prohibited conduct has already affected the EU market while the UK was still in the EU. After the transition period ends, the competition authority in the UK may acquire jurisdiction over conduct which was initially under the European Commission's jurisdiction as part of its overall jurisdiction over the EU. And of course, the competition authority in the UK will no longer be able to investigate violations of the EU competition law. Conduct which infringes both UK and EU competition laws post-Brexit will continue to be a subject of separate investigations by the two authorities. The main difference procedurally for the after Brexit is that although the EC will continue to carry out its investigations of breaches of EU competition law after the transition period, it will no longer have the power to carry out down raids on businesses in the UK. They will have to send a request for information and practically expect that request for information to be answered. State aid. State aid, as I said, it's a great area because it's also part of the political reasons that generated the Brexit. State aid is considered the third pillar of competition law because it's considered to lay the common ground for competition, which practically makes sense for the application of all other competition rules. But this is a gray area because one of the reasons that Brexit happened is UK's desire to have its own policy, national policy of subsidies of British businesses. So during the transition period, the European Commission still has jurisdiction to review state aid applications from the EU, but post transition period, the UK has made no mention of aligning with state aid rules in its position document that I mentioned earlier, which refers to competition rules after December 31st. Of course, the European Commission was pretty firm to react that absent of applying the current state rules, the UK could provide unrestricted subsidies to British industry, and this is far more amplified by the current coronavirus crisis, where the European Commission really wants to coordinate all the state aid that is granted throughout the European Union at this point. The EU also invoked a political declaration that accompanied the withdrawal agreement, which stated that both parties should uphold common high standards in applying the formal rules of trade for the EU-UK relationship. They want to hold the UK up to its word and say that state aid is part of this future understanding, but of course the UK seeks to have full autonomy to operate in its subsidy policy. A separate case and a very interesting one is Northern Ireland, which is part of a protocol on applying to state aid specifically, although only in relation to goods, not services. This protocol mentions that the European Commission will still have jurisdiction over state aid granted in Northern Ireland by December 31st, 2024, and this may be prolonged by additional subsequent periods of 4 years by diplomatic consent, by referendum in Northern Ireland. But there is also potential that the EU will enforce this jurisdiction over state aid in Northern Ireland furthermore, because logically it is considered that any state aid granted elsewhere in the EU which affects the cross-border trade with Northern Ireland may fall under the prohibition of state aid. And my example here was if a retailer has stores in both Northern Ireland and the Great Britain, and they receive a government subsidy for the Great Britain operation, its competitors in the Northern Ireland or the European Commission could say that this affects competition over the border, and it's still subject to state aid rules which are enforced by the European Commission. To complicate things even more, there's a UK internal market bill which gives powers for the ministers to override the state aid provisions of the protocol. And at least publicly, the reason for this is especially to have a veto right on the European Commission stepping over its powers in pieces like the one mentioned earlier, which is which brings us to the conclusion that absent of a deal with the UK, the businesses may expect UK businesses may expect scrutiny from the European Commission if they also operate in the EU. One of the legal documents, one of the legal obligations that the European Commission has in its view is the subsidies and countervailing measures agreement under the WTO, which bans subsidies, which favor exports at the expense of imports. The UK has already announced that they will follow World Trade Organization for the subsidies of goods. So this may be a reason, or this may be a loophole for the European Commission to intervene. And they also said that they would adhere to stated rules that they mutually agree in free trade deals that Raymond discussed earlier. Again, the WTO rules have no say on services, only on goods. So this is also maybe giving just limited power to the European Commission to step in. But the conclusion is that even if no deal goes through and no deal result goes through and the UK will be able to enforce its own subsidy program, businesses selling goods into the EU, into the continental Europe should carefully consider obtaining subsidies which are in breach of EU rules, because the European Union may still want to jump in and sanction this type of deals. Thank you, and if you want to ask any questions, please.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I should say that at our call yesterday, we had 122 people watching us on Facebook. You haven't done quite so well. You've only got 120. So again, it's good to see that there's such interest and sustained interest in the presentation here. Now, there is a question I can see from James Casarinis of Rilvan in the text box. Can you see that, gentlemen? There are two questions, in fact, and I can speak to the first one. I know I've had to produce evidence of a UK address to keep my UK banking going. That was even before Brexit happened. I have seen other reports. Perhaps, Raymond, are you aware of what's going on here?
Yeah, it's very strange, and I think it's the whole COVID situation as well. The UK banks have got very nervous on an international basis, and I think they've been ultra cautious. The other aspect is, for example, all the major banks here are shutting down the ability to actually open accounts, but that's more about bounce back loans as well. So what you've got is a very nervous UK banking system at the moment, and I think it's being part and parcel caught up with that. It's even happening at a domestic level. Like I say, they've shut down the abilities to really open business accounts as well. So strange time in this kind of transition and the withdrawal, as well as the whole aspect of, and it goes back to state aid really, doesn't it, and support and what's been put in place here in the UK.
Thank you. Certainly, I've also seen a note about the fact that ID cards EU will no longer be sufficient to get into the UK if you're an EU national. I believe that is from the end of this year.
Yes, and again, on the employment side as well, it's, you know, employers have to kind of register if there's EU nationals need to register here in the UK as well. So I think there'll be kind of a transitional period as we go into that January 1st situation. And of course, a whole set of new immigration rules come in on January the 1st as well. So I think it's, in a sense, you know, we're treating each other as now as, you know, separate countries, separate approaches, and the immigration process is part and parcel of that, and IDs, and EU is going to be, citizens are going to be treated as the rest of the world in coming into the UK, and that's part of the issue I think you were experiencing there.
Thank you. I did commiserate with you for only getting 120 people on Facebook. I'm told we're now on 131. So you're setting a high standard for our next webinar, which Anna will tell us about presently. Our members in the chamber include a number, I think, particularly one thinks of Flutter, the former Paddy Power Betfair, in the gambling industry, or sorry, the entertainment through wagering industry. Would you care to put a prediction or a bet? Will there be a deal done? What are the chances? If you were putting money down, would you vote? Would you put your money against the deal or a deal being done at the last minute? Raymond, can I start with you first on that?
I think we won't have a withdrawal agreement. I think we'll have mini deals.
Cosmin, Andrei, have you any thoughts there, please?
I bet on having a deal because, as we may know, the trade between UK and the EU is really, really big and significant. So I don't think they will risk in losing the markets by putting tariff barriers or restrictions or prohibitions, not only for good but also for services, financial stuff, and so I bet on they will get it through.
Thank you. I should say we do also have contacts with the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Romania. Had a pleasure of meeting them on their last visit, but I have no inside information, I hasten to say. But my understanding is the two particular issues in the negotiation, one was fishing and the other was state aid. So perhaps, Andrei, you might have a view upon, will the UK become the new become a European version of Singapore in being able to compete much more effectively with EU business?
It's hard to respond to that because, of course, the EU will want to keep some control over the state aid. I think that here, without a deal, it will be very, very difficult to have a common ground for competition, and the EU may want to use every tool available to step in and try to protect EU businesses against subsidized UK businesses. But maybe I think this is one of the areas where a deal needs to be reached. Coming back to your earlier questions, I don't believe that there will be an all-compassing deal, but some topics really need to be resolved. I mean, for passports and ID cards, I think the UK may want to have the freedom to apply separate regimes to various countries within the EU. But as regards state aid, I think a deal needs to be reached for everyone.
Thank you. And there's another question, I believe, from Maria Cristina Flora that's in the chat box. The double taxation treaty. Now, maybe this is one we should be looking to Cosmin on with your EY colleagues. I've not heard anything about the double taxation treaty. Of course, the other thing that's equally important, or much more so, is the bilateral investment protection treaty. Again, neither aim to do with the EU membership, but both are very, well, the second one certainly was, because you had the European drinks case We all know the issues that the EU has had with that as a matter of state aid, which again comes back into Andrei's area. But I would hope that both of those areas are going to be things which are looked at separately. My impression is that the Dutch treaty is very advantageous, and for that reason, many British investments are actually done through the Netherlands to take advantage of the Dutch double taxation treaty. Cosmin, have you any thoughts on that? Or Andrei? Or Raymond?
Cosmin, I think you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No, just if you have any thoughts, please. I just wanted to say I did not heard about any update on this renegotiation of the double tax treaty between the UK and Romania. But if this will happen, I think that based on our tax alerts, EY will for sure inform the business environment in Romania.
I mean, from my perspective, of course, Britain is looking at that bilateral type of approach. So I would imagine that stays in place, not being part of a EU situation. And I think the huge advantage, of course, for Romania is, I think, a closer relationship we can do in business and in a sense, manage those type of processes could be really a powerful advantage.
Yeah, actually, with the exception of VAT, tax is a pretty national issue within the EU, so there should be no need to work around the current rules in relation to bilateral treaties.
My guess would be that there's probably not enough bandwidth for people to negotiate anything except the withdrawal agreement or the future agreement between the UK and the EU, and anything else I suspect will be put on the back burner until they've got more time to look at it. That's just my personal opinion. Do we have any other questions, please? We're coming up to time. We're just over time, in fact. So is there any other questions on Zoom? Anna, do we have any questions on Facebook?
No, for now, no. They're just on Zoom.
Well, in that case, I think we should probably wind up here. Thank you all very much, gentlemen, for your contributions. I think we've had a very good discussion this afternoon on this one. Let's see what happens in the next few days with news from Brussels and London as to whether it's going to be no deal, mini deals, or a big deal. Let's see on that one. Anna, when's our next event, please?
Thank you, Neil. Thank you again to our panelists for delivering these updates on Brexit. I hope this was very informative for everyone. And taking into consideration the fact that there's a challenging number of cases in Romania, we just decided to wait on the face-to-face events. This is why coming up next, our next online event will be on the 27th of October, together with one of our members, World Marketing Partners, where we will discuss what marketing and financial plan should one develop when entering the US market. So either British citizen or Romanian should have some plans when entering this very different market than European one. Also, in 2 weeks' time, we will have a webinar on top trends in digital transformation together with our partners from Romania Insider. If you want to stay updated with our events, I will just type the link of our website. You can check the details for each event and also subscribe and sign up for the events. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you, Anna, and to our colleagues Stefan and Madalina for organizing today's event. You have heard about our online offering. We are considering what we can offer as a face-to-face event. But in view of the current measures being taken both in Bucharest and in the UK, we're taking that rather cautiously at the moment. So if we think we can do something safely, we'll let you know. Thank you and have a very good afternoon.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.